After my grandparents passed away in a car accident, their attorney disclosed I was the only heir to their $26 million estate. My family demanded I turn it over. I refused. That night, they threw me out. I moved into my grandparents' home. The next day, they came to evict me, but stopped dead when they saw who was standing beside me. Their faces went rigid in shock. Can you imagine inheriting a fortune, only for your own family to betray you, trying to kick you out of your home because you wouldn't hand it all over to them? It sounds like fiction, right? But this is my story, and it's about how money really does reveal true colors. My name is Natalie, and until very recently, I was just a 27-year-old kindergarten teacher. I lived paycheck to paycheck, in a tiny apartment, doing a job I absolutely adored. My world revolved around tiny humans and finger paint. My own parents were always present physically, but emotionally, they were a million miles away. My dad, Richard, was obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder. My mom, Diane, was consumed by social climbing. Family dinners were rare, usually interrupted by calls, and always felt cold. So, from the age of 5, my true home became my grandparents' house. Elizabeth and Harold. They weren't just wealthy, they were humble, real, and they poured their heart into me. Their modest 4-bedroom house, with its vegetable garden where Grandpa Harold taught me to grow tomatoes, and the kitchen where Grandma Elizabeth taught me to bake and sew, that was where I felt loved. They came to every school play, every soccer game my parents missed. They built their empire from scratch, a logistics company that grew from 1 truck to 200. But you'd never know it. Grandpa drove the same old pickup for 2 decades. Grandma clipped coupons. They always told me, money is just a tool, Natalie, not a measure of your worth. Use it to build something meaningful, not to impress people who don't matter. This philosophy was the great divide in our family. My dad, their only son, resented their frugality. He expected to inherit everything and live large. He called them stingy. They saw it as character building. They paid for his college, but he had to work summers. They helped him with a down payment on a modest house, not the luxury condo he demanded. The final straw? He wanted a senior position in their company without earning it. They refused. He stormed out, took a corporate job elsewhere, and their relationship never recovered. For me, it was different. They paid for my education, debt-free, but encouraged me to follow my passion, not profit. When I chose kindergarten teaching, they were genuinely thrilled, even though my salary was barely above minimum wage. We had Sunday dinners every week. I helped them with their smartphones, they taught me family recipes. I always stayed with them during holidays, which caused endless friction with my mom, who saw it as a personal rejection. My little 1-bedroom apartment, filled with second-hand furniture and plants, was cozy. My salary covered my needs, and I found joy in simple things: books, hiking, volunteering. My grandparents respected my independence, only occasionally surprising me with practical gifts like winter tires. Then, 6 weeks ago, everything shattered. I was grading papers on a Tuesday night when the call came. My grandparents. A drunk driver. Instantaneous. Gone. The officer said they didn't suffer. But that brought no comfort. The funeral was a blur. My parents took charge, arguing about costs. My brother Jason, glued to his phone. Aunt Pam cried dramatically for the cameras, then stopped the moment they were put away. Uncle Steve just awkwardly followed her shadow. None of them had visited my grandparents in years, yet suddenly they were the grieving family. I just felt numb. The 2 people who truly got me were gone. Their warm home, empty. I couldn't even step inside. I went back to my apartment, took bereavement leave, and tried to process. 2 weeks later, the lawyer, Matthew Goldstein, called. He asked me and my immediate family to his office for the will reading. Little did I know, that meeting would upend everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning of the will reading was gray and drizzly, mirroring my soul. I arrived early, dressed simply, carrying the umbrella Grandma had insisted I always keep in my car. Matthew, with his silver hair and kind eyes, greeted me. Elizabeth and Harold were extraordinary people, he said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. I'll miss our chess games and her lemon bars. My eyes welled up. He was a true friend to them. But before we could say more, the glass door swung open, and my family exploded into the room. My dad, checking his expensive watch, looking like an older, colder version of my grandfather. My mom, Diane, with a designer bag worth more than my rent. My 25-year-old brother, Jason, swaggering in with sunglasses indoors, looking like he'd slept in his wrinkled shirt. Behind them, Aunt Pam, already loudly complaining on her phone. Uncle Steve, trailing, nodding politely to me before averting his gaze. Well, let's get this over with, my father announced, no greetings, no warmth. Some of us have actual businesses to run. Matthew offered a thin smile. Of course, Richard. Please follow me. The tension was palpable. We settled around a huge oak table. My father took the head, claiming authority. I chose a seat closer to Matthew. My mom next to my dad, Jason next to her, Pam and Steve across. The usual alliances. Before we begin, Matthew said, I want to clarify, Elizabeth and Harold were of completely sound mind when they updated their will last year. They were thorough and explicit. My father snorted. Just read it, Matt. We know how it goes. Dad built the business. I'm his son. Standard inheritance. Matthew ignored him, opened a leather portfolio, and began to read. The formal legal language droned on, detailing revocations and appointments. My family shifted impatiently. Finally, he reached the part we were all waiting for. We hereby bequeath our entire estate, he read, including but not limited to all cash assets totaling approximately $8 million, our investment portfolio valued at approximately $12 million, all real estate holdings, including our primary residence, valued at $5 million, and our 25% ownership stake in Alexander Logistics, valued at approximately $1 million, to our beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. The room went completely silent. I stopped breathing. I must have misheard. This couldn't be real. Matthew continued, unwavering. We specifically and intentionally make no provisions for our son Richard Alexander, our daughter-in-law Diane Alexander, our grandson Jason Alexander, our daughter Pamela Davis, or our son-in-law Stephen Davis, as we have provided for them during their lifetime, and have made our reasons clear to our attorney. Let me see that. My father shouted, his chair tipping backward as he lunged. He snatched the document, scanning it frantically. This is ridiculous. $26 million to a kindergarten teacher, my mother shrieked. She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that. Jason slammed his hand on the table. What about me? I'm family. I need startup capital for my business ventures. Aunt Pam turned on me, her face flushed with fury. What did you do? How did you manipulate them into this? I just sat there. Shocked. Unable to process. Matthew calmly retrieved the will from my father's trembling hand. If you will all please take your seats. There is more. He pressed a button. The large screen on the wall illuminated. And there they were. Grandma and Grandpa, sitting side by side on their living room sofa. My heart clenched. They looked exactly as they had the last time I saw them. Alive. Grandpa spoke first. If you are watching this, it means we have passed on. We want to explain our decisions directly, to prevent any misunderstandings. Grandma continued, her voice so gentle, yet so firm. Richard, Pam, we love you as our children. But we have been deeply disappointed by the values you have embraced, with the exception of Natalie. They detailed years of missed family events, of loans requested and never repaid, of dismissive attitudes towards their choices. The business we built, Grandpa said, was never about amassing wealth for its own sake. It was about creating security for our family and opportunities for our employees. We built it through hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly. Natalie, Grandma added, is the only one who has demonstrated these values consistently. She visits us not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares. She chose a career helping children despite the low pay because it fulfills her purpose. We trust Natalie to be a good steward of what we have built. The video continued, outlining their hopes for how the inheritance might support education and community development. As the screen went dark, my father exploded. This is absolute garbage. They were clearly senile. We'll contest this will. No judge will uphold this insanity. Matthew remained perfectly calm. They anticipated that response, Richard. They underwent extensive cognitive testing. Multiple independent doctors certified their competence. Additionally, they documented years of behaviors that informed their decision. I must advise you, contesting this will would be extremely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to succeed. My mother turned to me, her voice suddenly saccharine sweet. Honey, Natalie, darling, you understand this isn't right. Your grandparents were confused. This money belongs to the family, not just you. You'll share it with us, won't you? I felt cornered. All eyes on me. I have to think about this, I stammered. I had no idea they would do this. Think about it? Jason scoffed. There's nothing to think about. That money should be divided equally or managed by someone with actual business experience. He meant himself, of course. My father nodded emphatically. As the arguing intensified, Matthew gently touched my arm. You don't have to decide anything today, Natalie. Take time to process. He handed me a thick envelope. This contains all relevant documents, keys to their house, and contact information for their financial advisors. Call me anytime. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Threats of lawsuits, accusations flying. Matthew eventually asked everyone to leave. As we filed out, my father grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly harsh. This discussion is not over, he hissed. Come to our house tonight at 6. We will sort this out as a family. His tone left no room for refusal. I nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to argue. As they sped off in their luxury cars, I sat in my 10-year-old sedan, clutching that envelope. An inheritance, meant to be a blessing, had become a curse. I spent the afternoon driving aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind. Part of me wanted to peek inside that envelope, to understand the weight of what my grandparents had entrusted to me. Another part was terrified of the responsibility. At 5:45, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Everyone was already there. Their 5,000-square-foot house loomed, all granite and glass, designed to impress, never to welcome. I took a deep breath, grabbed the envelope, and went inside. They were waiting in the formal living room, a space usually reserved for my mother's socialite gatherings. My father stood by the fireplace, scotch in hand. My mother perched on an uncomfortable designer chair. Jason sprawled on the sofa, scrolling. Aunt Pam paced nervously. Uncle Steve stood by the window, looking like he wished he was anywhere else. Sit down, Natalie, my father said, his voice chillingly calm. I chose a chair near the door, a sudden instinct telling me I might need a quick exit. Let us be reasonable about this, he began, his business negotiation voice in full effect. Your grandparents clearly weren't thinking clearly. They meant for the family to benefit, not just you. My mother nodded vigorously. Sweetheart, managing wealth is complicated. Your father has the experience to handle this properly. You can still get a nice portion, perhaps enough for a down payment on a real house, instead of that apartment. The condescension made my skin crawl, but I stayed silent. Emboldened, my father continued. Here's what we propose. You sign over the estate to me, as the financial head of the family. I will ensure everyone gets their fair share. You'll receive 10%, which is more than generous considering your limited needs. 10%? I finally found my voice. That would still be over $2 million. Exactly. Jason jumped in. More than enough for a teacher. I need at least $5 million for my cryptocurrency exchange platform. It's going to be huge. I looked at him skeptically. Jason had bounced between get-rich-quick schemes for years, never holding a job. His last venture, an app for rating public restrooms, had burned through $50,000 of my parents' money. The house should go to us, Aunt Pam interjected. We have 3 children to consider. That neighborhood would give them access to better schools. I almost laughed. She'd never visited my grandparents at that house. Her children were strangers. As the evening wore on, their tactics evolved. When demands failed, they tried guilt. After all we've done for you, my mother said, her eyes dramatically moist. We gave you life, a good home, opportunities. Is this how you repay family loyalty? I nearly choked on my water. Loyalty? When was the last time either of them called just to check on me? When had they ever attended one of my school performances? My father changed strategies again. We are not asking, Natalie. We are telling you what will happen. Either you sign the transfer documents voluntarily, or we will contest the will. We'll bring up every questionable interaction you had with your grandparents. How often did you visit them alone? What did you tell them about us when we weren't there? It will get ugly. The threat hung in the air, cold and menacing. I felt sick. But something inside me hardened. A memory surfaced, Grandpa teaching me to stand my ground during a playground dispute when I was 8. No one can take your dignity unless you give it away, Natalie, he'd said. Know what is right, and hold firm. Uncle Steve, who had been silent, finally spoke. Maybe we should all calm down and give Natalie some time to think. This is a lot to process. My father rounded on him. Stay out of this, Steve. This is family business. I am family, Steve responded quietly, but quickly retreated under my father's glare. As the clock ticked past 9, Jason started drafting transfer paperwork on his laptop. My mother called their personal attorney for advice. Aunt Pam scrolled through real estate listings for my grandparents' house, talking about knocking down walls. They had already divided my inheritance without my consent. At 10:30, my father printed out the crude document and slid it across the coffee table with a pen. Sign it, he demanded. Now. I picked up the paper, reading the broad language. It essentially signed away all my rights, in exchange for a percentage to be determined later at my father's sole discretion. I put the paper down. I took a deep breath. No, I said. The room went silent. What did you just say? My father's voice was dangerously low. I said, no, I will not sign this, or anything like it. My grandparents trusted me with their legacy for a reason. I intend to honor that trust. My mother launched into a tirade about ingratitude. Jason called me names I won't repeat. Aunt Pam began sobbing dramatically about her children's future. Through it all, I sat still, the word no becoming a shield around me. Finally, my father slammed his glass down so hard it cracked. That is enough, he roared. I always told Dad you were not to be trusted. You manipulated them, just like you're trying to manipulate us now with this innocent act. He stalked toward me, his finger inches from my face. You have a choice to make right now, Natalie. Either you sign that paper and remain part of this family, or you take your precious inheritance and consider yourself disowned. You cannot have both. The ultimatum hung in the air. I looked around at their faces, searching for any sign of love, of understanding. I found none. In that moment, a painful truth hit me: they had never seen me as family. I was just a means to an end. A potential source of money. Nothing more. I'm not signing, I said, firmly standing up. I'm sorry you feel this way, but I have to respect what Grandma and Grandpa wanted. Then get out of my house, my father snarled. Pack your things and leave tonight. You are no longer welcome here. I live in my own apartment, I reminded him. I have for years. He laughed, a cold, empty sound. The apartment we co-signed for because your teacher's salary couldn't qualify for the lease? Check your agreement, Natalie. We own that building through one of our investment companies. Consider your lease terminated. My stomach dropped. He was right. When I couldn't qualify, they'd offered to help. I never realized they actually owned the building through a shell company. You have 30 minutes to pack essential items, my mother said, checking her watch. The locks will be changed tomorrow. I stood frozen. They were actually kicking me out. Making me homeless. Over money they hadn't earned. The clock is ticking, Jason smirked. Better hurry, sis. Those 26 million won't keep you warm tonight. 30 minutes. Not long to pack up my life. I moved on autopilot, grabbing clothes, toiletries, important documents, a few sentimental items. My mind reeled. How could they do this? How could money turn my family into complete strangers? My father stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me like a guard. My mother was already on the phone with a real estate agent about selling my grandparents' house. You were never really part of this family anyway, my father said coldly as I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag. Your mother and I were going to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together. The casual cruelty of his words staggered me. I'd always sensed I was unwanted, but to have it confirmed so bluntly. We've wasted enough time and money on you, my mother added, appearing in the doorway. Your private school tuition, braces, summer camps, all those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment. Investment. Not love, not care. An investment that had performed poorly. Jason appeared next, leaning against the wall, smug. You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one, he said. That money will run out faster than you think. And then what? You'll come crawling back, and we'll remember how you chose cash over family. I zipped up my final bag, fighting back tears. I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Is that everything? My father demanded. I looked around the room that had been mine since childhood, though I'd only stayed there occasionally since college. Ballet trophies, a framed diploma, bookshelves, photo albums. So much left behind. I can come back for the rest later, I said. My father laughed. There won't be a later. Whatever you leave tonight goes to charity or the trash. Your call. The finality of it hit me. They were erasing me from their lives completely. All because I wouldn't give them money they had done nothing to earn. I grabbed my grandmother's quilt from the bed, stuffing it into my already overflowing bag. I wouldn't leave that behind. With 3 bags slung over my shoulders and one in my hand, I made my way downstairs. No one offered to help. At the front door, I turned around one last time. My family stood in a line, faces set in anger, disappointment, and smug satisfaction. You might have money now, my mother said, but family is forever. You'll realize what you've thrown away. I'm not the one throwing away family, I replied quietly. You are. With that, I walked out the door and into the cool night air. The door slammed behind me with a chilling finality. Standing beside my car, the weight of everything crashed down. Homeless. My apartment gone. My family disowned me. In a few hours, I had gained millions but lost the only support system I'd ever known, flawed as it was. I sat in my car and finally, the tears came. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for my grandparents, their absence more acute than ever. I cried for the family I had always hoped for but never truly had. Mostly, I cried for myself, adrift in a world that had completely changed. After what felt like hours, I wiped my eyes and started the car. I had nowhere to go. Hotels? No available credit. Friends? How could I explain this at midnight? Then, I remembered the envelope Matthew had given me. I pulled it out. A set of keys. With a familiar rabbit-shaped keychain Grandma had cherished. The keys to their house. The house that was now, unbelievably, mine. The drive took 20 minutes. With each mile, I felt simultaneously pulled toward the comfort of their home and terrified of entering it without them. I'd avoided it since the funeral, unable to face the emptiness. The porch light was on, probably on a timer Grandpa had set. I sat in the driveway for several minutes, gathering courage. Finally, I grabbed a bag and approached the front door, the key shaking in my hand. The house smelled exactly the same. Grandma's lemon verbena potpourri, Grandpa's wood polish. I flipped on the lights, half expecting to hear their voices. The silence was deafening. I went to the guest room I always used, dropping my bag on the bed. Everything was as I'd left it after my last visit, a month before the accident. The novel I was reading, a bookmark in place. Fresh towels folded on the dresser, placed there by Grandma in anticipation of my next stay. The thoughtfulness of it, the expectation of continuity they couldn't have known would be broken, undid me again. I sank onto the bed and cried until exhaustion took over, falling asleep fully clothed. Morning came with disorienting brightness. For a moment, I expected to smell coffee brewing, to hear Grandpa's off-key whistling. Reality crashed back. They were gone. And somehow, I had inherited both their fortune and their enemies, all in the form of my own family. My phone had blown up overnight. Texts and missed calls, mostly from my father and mother. Alternating between threats and sudden, sweet attempts at reconciliation. "We can work this out if you'll be reasonable," one from my mother read. My father was less subtle. "You have 24 hours to reconsider before we file suit." Jason sent a single text, "Enjoying the big empty house?" Not for long. That last one sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like a threat, not just bluster. I forwarded it to Matthew, whose expression darkened. "Threats and potential breaking and entering," he muttered. "I think it's time to activate the final part of your grandparents' plan." He made several quick phone calls, speaking cryptically about meetings and evidence. When he finished, he turned to me, his expression determined. "Your grandparents anticipated this exact scenario, Natalie. They knew Richard and the others wouldn't accept their decision. They prepared for it. Tomorrow morning, we'll be ready for them. But tonight, I suggest you review these materials so you understand exactly what you're fighting for." He gestured to the journals, financial documents, and legal papers. "Your grandparents built more than just wealth. They built relationships based on trust and respect. That is their true legacy to you." As everyone except Carlos left, promising to return the next morning, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't alone. My grandparents had ensured that. They had given me not just their money, but their wisdom and their community. I spent the evening reading, getting to know my grandparents in a new way. They had been strategic, thoughtful, meticulous. Everything was deliberate, including their choice of heir. For the first time since the will reading, I felt equal to the responsibility. I would not let them down. Another text from Jason came through as I prepared for bed. Better sleep with one eye open, sis. Tomorrow you'll see what happens to people who steal from this family. Instead of fear, resolve hardened within me. Tomorrow would indeed show what happens when people try to steal from family, but not in the way Jason imagined. I woke early, anxious but determined. By 8 a.m., Matthew arrived with coffee, pastries, and a thick folder. These are restraining orders ready to be filed, he explained. And these are cease and desist letters addressing Jason's specific threats. Dorothy, the housekeeper, arrived next, immediately taking over the kitchen. The familiar smells of bacon and coffee filled the house, a strange comfort before the storm. By 9:30, the house had filled with supporters. Carlos by the front door, a silent guardian. Rosa Martinez, the business partner, set up her laptop, ready to present financial evidence. Dorothy bustled around, ensuring everyone had coffee. At 9:45, cars pulled into the driveway. My father's black sedan, my mother's white SUV, Aunt Pam's convertible, and Jason's impractical sports car. They're early, Matthew observed, trying to catch us off guard. The doorbell rang aggressively. Pounding. Matthew nodded to Carlos, who opened the door. My father, momentarily surprised to see someone other than me, demanded, "Where is Natalie?" "This is family business." Carlos remained immovable. "Miss Natalie is expecting you. Please, come in." My family filed into the foyer, stopping short when they saw the gathering in the living room. I stood in the center, Matthew slightly behind me. "What is this?" my mother asked, her voice brittle. "You brought outsiders into a private family matter." Before I could answer, the front door opened again. 3 more people entered. Judge Robert Henderson, a tall, dignified man in his 70s, a decades-long friend of my grandparents. Police Chief Maria Williams, whose daughter's education had been supported by my grandparents' foundation. And Thomas Jang, their financial advisor for over 20 years. My father's face paled at the sight of Judge Henderson. The judge had ruled against him in a business dispute years earlier. "Robert," my father stammered, attempting a jovial tone that fell flat. "What brings you here?" The judge's expression was stern. "I am here at the request of Harold and Elizabeth Alexander, through their attorney, Matthew Goldstein. They asked me, in the event of their deaths, to serve as an impartial witness to any family disputes regarding their estate." My mother turned to Chief Williams. "This is ridiculous. We're here to collect family heirlooms. Why is law enforcement present?" The chief smiled thinly. "I am here as a friend of the Alexander family, not in an official capacity. Unless, of course, someone commits a crime. In which case, my official duties would naturally take precedence." The implied threat hung heavy. As if on cue, the back door opened, and 6 more people entered, forming a semicircle behind me. Longtime employees from my grandparents' business. People who had known my father since childhood and had witnessed his transformation into an entitled, absent family member. "You've got to be kidding me," Jason muttered. "Is this supposed to intimidate us?" I stepped forward, finding strength in the support surrounding me. "I know why you are here. You believe you are entitled to my grandparents' estate, despite their explicit wishes. You think you can bully or threaten me into giving you what you want." My father's face hardened. "Those old fools were manipulated. We are simply here to correct that injustice." From behind me, Thomas Jang spoke up. "Actually, Richard, I have documentation of every attempt you made to access your parents' assets over the last 20 years. He opened a folder. "This includes the unauthorized transfer attempt from their retirement account in 2016, the forged check incident in 2018, and your attempt to have Elizabeth declared incompetent last year after she refused to fund Jason's failed cryptocurrency venture." My father's face was beet red. "But that's taken out of context." Rosa Martinez stepped forward, tablet in hand. I also have records of the company loan you never repaid, Richard. $200,000, borrowed in 2012 for your vacation home in Aspen. Your parents never pursued repayment, though they certainly could have. One by one, my grandparents' friends and associates presented evidence of my family's attempts to extract money over the years, contrasted with their minimal involvement in my grandparents' actual lives. Aunt Pam, who had been quietly fuming, suddenly turned to me. "You ungrateful little snake! You turned our parents against us. Poisoned them with lies." Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Davis, I reviewed the video journals Elizabeth kept. There was no external influence. Your parents were quite clear about their reasoning." "This is all very theatrical," my mother said dismissively. "But it changes nothing. We will contest the will. We will win." Matthew stepped forward. "I have prepared documentation for you all. It includes evidence that would become public record if you contest the will." He handed each family member a thick envelope. "This includes banking records, text messages, emails, and video evidence of your interactions with Harold and Elizabeth over the past decade. I encourage you to review it before making decisions about legal action." Uncle Steve, silent until now, opened his envelope and began reading. His face grew increasingly pale. After a moment, he touched Aunt Pam's arm. "We should go," he said quietly. "This is not a fight we can win." She shrugged him off angrily. My father, however, had gone very still after scanning the contents of his envelope. There were records of business dealings he clearly hoped would remain private, along with transcripts of cruel comments he had made about his parents when he thought no one was listening. Chief Williams stepped forward. "I should also mention that this property is under 24-hour security surveillance. Any attempt to remove items without permission would constitute theft." Carlos nodded. "The new system records everything, inside and out, all backed up to secure cloud storage." As my family absorbed the implications, I walked to the sideboard and picked up a stack of documents Matthew had prepared. "These are cease and desist orders regarding the threats you have made," I said, passing them to Jason. "These," I continued, handing papers to my father, "are notices that I am aware of the items taken from this house after the funeral and expect their immediate return." My mother began to protest, but I cut her off. "And these," I said, giving her the final document, "are the terms under which I am willing to maintain any relationship with you all going forward. They include respect for my grandparents' wishes, and an end to all attempts to contest the will." The room fell silent. My family finally understood the position they were in. Not only had my grandparents legally protected their decisions, but they had anticipated and documented every possible challenge. The community of support they had built stood firmly with me, presenting a united front my family had not expected. My father was the first to break. "This is not over," he said, but the defeat in his voice suggested otherwise. "Actually, Richard, it is," Judge Henderson replied. "Your parents were meticulous in their planning. Any judge in this county would uphold their wishes based on the evidence they compiled." One by one, my family members retreated toward the door, their threats dissolving. Jason glared at me as he passed. "This is not the end," he muttered. "Perhaps not," I replied calmly. "But it is the end of you taking advantage of this family. My grandparents saw who you really are. That is why we are all here today." As they filed out to their cars, the tension dissipated. Dorothy immediately began serving fresh coffee and pastries, as if to cleanse the space. The others gathered around, offering congratulations and support. I felt strangely empty, neither triumphant nor devastated. I had stood my ground, protected my grandparents' wishes, but lost what remained of my family in the process. The victory felt hollow. Judge Henderson seemed to sense my conflict. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be proud, Natalie. Not just of what you did today, but how you did it. With dignity and principle." Rosa nodded in agreement. You are more like them than anyone else in the family. That is why they trusted you with everything. As my family's cars disappeared down the driveway, I realized I had crossed a threshold. The family I had known was gone. But in their place stood a community bound by genuine respect and shared values, the true legacy my grandparents had built over a lifetime. It wasn't the family I was born into, but perhaps it was the family I was meant to have all along. 6 months passed in a blur of learning and adjustment. The first weeks were the hardest, filled with legal paperwork, financial decisions, and the painful process of accepting that my biological family had chosen money over relationship. They made a few half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, but only when they needed something, proving that nothing had really changed. With Matthew's guidance and my grandparents' advisors, I established the Elizabeth and Harold Alexander Foundation for Education, dedicating $10 million to supporting underprivileged students and schools in our community. The foundation focused on arts, education, and vocational training, areas my grandparents always believed were undervalued. And I returned to teaching kindergarten, much to the surprise of those who thought I'd quit. My classroom became a showcase for what was possible with proper resources. I funded new books, art supplies, technology. Every child got healthy snacks, winter coats if they needed them. Small expenses for me, huge differences in their lives. Under Rosa Martinez's mentorship, I learned the basics of Alexander logistics. While I didn't take an active management role, I ensured the company maintained my grandparents' values, including their profit-sharing program and generous retirement benefits. The business continued to thrive, providing stable employment for over 100 people. My grandparents' house, once painfully empty, gradually became a home again. I moved from the guest room into the master bedroom, though it took months before I could sleep there without feeling like an intruder. With Carlos's help, I renovated the large basement into a community space for foundation events and educational programs. Dorothy still came 3 times a week, refusing to fully retire. My biological family made occasional attempts to re-establish contact, their motives always transparent. My father called when his company faced cash flow problems. My mother reached out when her social circle learned about my foundation, suddenly wanting to serve on the board. Jason texted when his latest venture failed, asking for startup capital. Aunt Pam called around the holidays, suggesting family should be together, especially family with large houses. Each time, I politely but firmly maintained my boundaries, referring them to the terms I had established after the confrontation, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care, not financial advantage. None of them could meet those simple terms. Instead, I built new traditions with the chosen family my grandparents had cultivated. Sunday dinners continued, now hosted by me, with rotating guests, Rosa, Matthew, Carlos and his family, Dorothy, and others who had been part of my grandparents' circle. We celebrated holidays, shared milestones, supported each other. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was a community bound by something stronger than DNA, shared values and genuine affection. One crisp autumn morning, similar to the day of their accident, I visited my grandparents' graves for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the small bench nearby, finally ready for the conversation I had been avoiding. "I'm trying my best to honor what you built," I told them, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking aloud. "The foundation is making a difference. 3 students have already received full college scholarships who otherwise couldn't have gone. Your employees still speak about you with such respect." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, sending golden leaves spiraling downward. It was the kind of beautiful fall day my grandmother had loved. "I wish you were here to see it all," I continued. "I have so many questions about decisions you made, investments you chose, people you helped, but I'm figuring it out, step by step." In the months since inheriting, I had discovered numerous quiet charities my grandparents had supported anonymously, children whose medical bills they had paid, families whose homes they had saved from foreclosure, employees whose children they had put through college. All without public recognition. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered. "I understand now why you made the choice you did. It was never really about the money. It was about values." About using resources for something meaningful, rather than status or power. As I sat there, memories washed over me, not with the sharp pain of recent grief, but with a bittersweet appreciation for the time we had shared. Grandpa teaching me to fish. Grandma showing me how to make her famous apple pie. Both of them at every school play and graduation when my parents were too busy. The inheritance had never been primarily about money. It had been about entrusting me with their legacy, their values, their vision of what wealth could accomplish when used with purpose and compassion. The next day, I hosted the Foundation's first major event, a scholarship ceremony for 20 high school seniors who would receive full college funding. As I watched these bright, determined young people accept opportunities that would change their trajectories, I felt my grandparents' presence strongly. Among the recipients was Maria Vasquez, a brilliant young woman who reminded me of myself at that age, full of potential, but limited by financial constraints. She planned to become a teacher, to give back to her community, just as she had been supported. As the event concluded, Maria approached me, tears in her eyes. "My parents both work 2 jobs," she said. "No one in my family has ever gone to college. This changes everything. Not just for me, but for my younger siblings, who now see it as possible." In that moment, I understood completely what my grandparents had been building all along. Not just a business or a fortune, but a legacy of positive impact. A ripple effect that would continue long after they were gone. They had trusted me to amplify that effect, to carry their values forward in ways they would never see, but had envisioned. The money had indeed revealed true colors, showing me who valued wealth over relationship. But it had also revealed a community of genuine connection, people who had loved my grandparents for who they were, not what they owned. That was the true inheritance, more valuable than any dollar amount. As I move forward, I continue teaching, running the foundation, and learning the business. The wealth allows me to amplify good work, but it doesn't define me. I still live relatively simply, drive a practical car, and spend weekends volunteering. My grandparents would approve, I think. They always said money was a tool, not a goal. I finally understand what they meant. What about you? What's your experience with family and inheritance? Have you ever had to stand up to pressure from loved ones to do what you knew was right? Tell me what you think, I really want to know. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground. Remember, family is about love and respect, not obligation or advantage. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to honor your own values, whatever challenges you may face.